Okay, I think that the recording process was my entrance. So let's kick off the webinar. So good afternoon and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are located. My name is Mariana Larroche, and I'm one of the directors of the Valley event, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the INATPA AI and Blockchain Convergence Task Force. And I'm going to explain you a little bit why we are here. I'm not going to take that long. And also, I'm going to share a couple of invitations with you to engage. And then I will hand over to Thomas, who is going to actually be the moderator of this amazing panel. Just one small update for everyone. Sadly, Fabio Budris from the city of Buenos Aires cannot join us. He has a personal emergency, but we are going to try to follow up with him so we can have a further session in the future with him where we are going to hear more about the use case that they are developing. So apologies for that. It was a force majeure in that case. So basically, we at INACPA, one of the things that we have been advocating, and I personally have been advocating for quite a long time, is that we cannot look at the technology in isolation, right? We cannot talk about blockchain in one bucket, AI in another bucket, and virtual reality in another bucket. We actually need to understand how all of these technologies are interoperable and they work together, and how actually by working together we have better solutions and better impact on the real economy and the real world. And how we see it is as blockchain being the underlying ledger in which all of these technologies are going to be built. And this is basically what we wanted to explore with the task force. We wanted to understand what was the role of blockchain when it comes to the implementation of AI solutions, but also how AI can help us to in some of the applications that we have. And again, this is like not in isolation that we wanted to look at like the different impact of these technologies, but we actually wanted to look on specific use cases. Like if you have read some of our like previous reports or posts, you know that DeFi is one of the areas where we see a lot of interactions between blockchain and AI. And as I always say as well, identities are actually like the cornerstone of everything when it comes to blockchain, because we will need identities to build upon many different use cases, whether it's governance, whether it's identities for IoT devices to enhance the machine-to-machine interaction and the machine economy, or it's for supply chain of like, is absolutely necessary what we will do with identities, right? And for that, we wanted to understand what was actually going to be the impact of AI when it comes to the digital identities and the decentralized identities. And what a best way to do this than talking to the experts, right? So the AI task force, as I mentioned, is exploring different things. We have a couple of papers. I'm going to leave you here some links if you want to take a look. But this paper that I'm putting here on the link is the one that we presented a couple of weeks ago, already a month actually, to the European Commission. It was a call for contributions on the virtual worlds and generative AI, and our reply is also like the contribution of blockchain in these two areas. So you can take a look here. We are invited now in June to a workshop to talk more about our reply. If you want the general information about the task force, you can also find it there. Here are like the two links to the general page of the website where we are going to put all the information and the paper. But here is also another invitation of something that we're working with the task force. Sorry, wrong link. Is a position paper that we are working, so not working, the position paper. Let me see why I can do the invite. Always a thing with technology. Here we go. Easy to solve this time. That's the position paper that we are putting together with the task force. The position paper was worked internally within the task force, and we have support from the governmental advisory body of INADPA and the academic advisory body of INADPA as well. The document sadly is closed when it comes to the feedback opportunity. We have like feedback collected for over a month. And right now, we are only collecting logos for those organizations and companies that would like to subscribe to the vision that we presented in the position paper. The paper is going to be published tomorrow, so you have until tonight, whatever is the end of the day, to send me the document, your logo, sorry, to me or to Bara, and we will add it directly into the document. That said, that doesn't mean that this is the last chance that you will have to contribute to some of the work that we are doing with the task force. We are constantly developing research and documents about the intersection of AI and blockchain. We are working right now on a report that is going to be launched in the next 2 months, if everything goes well. And this webinar is also part of the sessions and the advocacy that we run within the task force to raise awareness about the intersection of these two technologies. So we will have minimum 4 webinars. I say minimum because every time that we get like fun topics or interesting topics, we do something as well. But this is the first one out of the 4 that we're going to host. And as I mentioned, identities are the cornerstone. So we actually wanted to start with identities and the impact of AI when it comes to the identities. And with that, I'm going to hand over actually to the panel, which is the most interesting part of this session. So Thomas, they're all yours.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mariana. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're zooming in from. Glad to have you here, and we're going to cover a range of very interesting topics with our great 2 panelists. We're going to start by defining some of these concepts like digital identity and distributed identity, and then we're going to see how AI is being integrated into the mix. And our panelists will also help us understand how these technologies are being integrated, as well as the benefits and the hurdles of them. But before jumping into that, let's start with some introductions. So my name is Tomasz, and I'm an ecosystem manager at the Hyperledger Foundation. Today, I will have the pleasure of helping to moderate this panel and starting with introducing our great panelists. I would like to introduce Dino Cataldo Dell'Accio, who is a Chief Information Officer at United Nations Joint Staff Fund. And they actually did some great work already with the technologies that we're going to be discussing today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that. And our other panelist is Char Howland, who's a software engineer at Indicio, as well as a community leader here at the Hyperledger Foundation, where she leads identity special interest groups. Thank you, Dino and Char, to take the time to speak about these topics with us today. So let's dive right in. As we know, I like the point that Mariana made. She said that digital identities are really the cornerstone of all of these digital interactions that we are having today. And as we know, they have transformed dramatically over the last decades, and they evolved from basic online authentication process to a very sophisticated systems powered by blockchains and the AI. Since these technologies not only enhance the security and functionality of digital identities, they also introduce new opportunities as well as the challenges across many different sectors. And this is something that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to ask our panelists if you could provide a brief overview of digital identity as well as decentralized identity, and tell us how this concept has evolved over the past decade. Dino, maybe we can start with you, and then we're going to ask Char to also talk a little bit about decentralized identity.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the introduction. So my name is Dino Dell'Accio. I'm, as Thomas alluded to, I'm the Chief Information Officer of the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund here in New York. I've been with the United Nations for almost 25 years. My background is specifically in information system auditing and assurance. And since 2017, I've been here at the UN Pension Fund as a CIO. One of the challenges, one of the projects that I was given when I was appointed the CIO was indeed to address an issue associated with digital identity, and more specifically, for the purpose of the UN Pension Fund processes, it was about proof of life, the proof of existence. So basically, the UN Joint Staff Pension Fund, when I arrived, had automated all its administrative processes except for one, the process related to supporting the 84,000 retirees and beneficiaries of the United Nations that reside in more than 192 countries across the globe. in confirming that they're still alive in order to ensure that they will be able to continue to receive their benefit, their payment. And this was done for 75 years through a paper form that was mailed through 192 postal services, asking each beneficiary, each recipient to sign the form and return it back to the UN Pension Fund. So as you can appreciate, this was quite a challenge because in addition to issues related to delays in making sure that a paper form was sent and received across the world through 192 postal services, there were also major issues related to the trustworthiness and reliability of the signature put on this paper. So indeed, my former colleagues, oversight bodies, governing bodies, always challenged the pension fund in demonstrating how we could show that and ensure that there was no fraud in this process. And of course, proving a negative is impossible. So the way that we designed the solution to this process was to prove a positive. Hence, the need to support a methodology, to support the verification, validation, and confirmation of the identity of the individual, and then allowing them to demonstrate that indeed they were still alive. So what we did here at the UN Pension Fund, we designed a solution using biometrics, specifically facial recognition, and the blockchain to create an immutable general ledger of all the transactions related to this process. So now going back to the concept of digital identity. So what we lived in firsthand was the fact that finally we were able to, if you will, translate into practical implementation the concept of allowing people to be recognized in the digital domain, and hence getting closer to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, specifically the 16.9, that talks about providing legal identity to all. But not only that, to extend this concept to provide identity in the digital domain where more and most of our processes, activities are today being conducted. So one of the biggest accomplishments that when we went live in 2021, so the system is in production, is now being used extensively by 40,000 individuals on an annual basis, is really to give them that ability to be identified, to be authenticated, to give them the ability to perform a vital process that ensure that they will continue to receive the payment related to their benefit on a regular basis using digital means. And this is also aligned with the World Bank principles on sustainable identification, which indeed called for universal coverage and removal of barriers to acquiring official identity manner and instrument by using a robust, producing secure and accurate identity system that will also be interoperable and responsive. So I think if I can summarize my answer to this concept is that through the use of specific technology, of which blockchain is one of the fundamental elements, we have been able to apply the concept of human centricity in the use of technology for the greater goods. Thank you. Back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, that's really great. Thanks, Dino. It's fascinating to hear this is already being implemented, 40,000 individuals having this sort of access. And I'm always interested to hear about how this was done, right? And I know that we're going to discuss it later. It's a fascinating project, really. But not to jump the gun, Char, would you mind also providing a little bit of background of decentralized identity, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tomas, for the opportunity to be here. Decentralized identity is a digital identity management system that focuses on individuals having control over their own information. It is decentralized, because individuals hold their own data rather than central authorities holding that data. It is a privacy-preserving, secure way to share and prove information about yourself online. Verifiable credentials are a key component of decentralized identity. They are digital credentials that are cryptographically verifiable and contain information that an individual can use to prove information about themselves. Verifiable credentials often use blockchain to store cryptographic information that is needed to issue and verify credentials. Of course, no private information goes on the ledger. In terms of how the concept of decentralized identity has evolved over the past decade, we're obviously increasingly doing so many life logistics online, like banking, taxes, interacting with the DMV. This has created a need to verify ourselves online and transfer information securely. This has spurred the model of centralization, where we have hundreds of usernames and passwords to our many accounts all over the internet, and those third-party institutions hold our data. At the same time, there's more awareness about the need for privacy online and protection against identity theft and fraud. There's a desire for better options where individuals can, with the same level of convenience, manage and control their own identities online. There's also concern around surveillance and wanting to be able to reveal only the bare minimum amount of information in an interaction where you need to identify yourself. So decentralized identity provides the convenience of verifying identity and transferring information online while empowering individuals to keep their data in a privacy-preserving and secure way.
That's great. Thank you, Char. And I saw Mariana's message. Yes, feel free to use the chat button to ask any questions you may have. And then at the end, we will ask our panelists to address those. And thanks again a lot, Dino and Char, for your, telling us about how digital identities and decentralized identities work. And, Dino, you mentioned that blockchain is one of the parts of the solution that you have at the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund. And I think also Char alluded to it when talking about decentralized identity. So I wanted to, as a next step, have a little bit of a closer look at the blockchain technology itself and ask you, so in what ways does blockchain enhance the security and trustworthiness of digital identities? To get to the second element of our nexus here.
Thank you, Thomas. Indeed, Char made reference to the cryptographic mechanism, to the role played by technology in creating hash value of data that it's used. She also, and I very much like that emphasis on making sure that people is clear about the fact that no PII, no personal identifiable information are stored on the blockchain itself. So the point exactly here is to appreciate what is the role of the different components that are part of a solution that uses blockchain, but it's not only relying on the blockchain itself. So when we talked about blockchain in an ecosystem and a solution that supports digital identity plays a specific role. And from my experience, that role I like to be defined as the role of trust anchor. The blockchain allows to create in the trustless architecture that medium that allows entity, individual, to share public identity information. And this is done, it's conducted by a discoverable DID document that have metadata that includes publicly identifiers of endpoints. To be very specific and practical, in our case, these identifiers of endpoints are the mobile devices that are used by each one of our retirees and beneficiaries, where their digital identity information are stored in a digital wallet, which is secure by hardware encryption, and that basically transmit only enough information to identify the endpoint, but it allows the user to remain at all time in total control of their private information, in our specific case, their biometric profile. So in our solution, there is no transmission and there is no storage of biometric information or any other person identified information at any time in our system. Well, the only thing that we do is we record on the blockchain, specifically in our case, the Hyperledger in the blockchain, the information related to a transaction that took place with identified endpoints that have been previously validated and rolled through a process of initial onboarding, and therefore that have been recorded in accordance with a specific schema. We have identified certain information that allow us to have an auditable, independently auditable and traceable series of transactions. So the blockchain in this ecosystem where you have biometric, facial recognition, where you have a blockchain that allows for the recording of if you will, the creation of the mutable ledger, play a role of complementing each other in enabling to have an immutable general ledger without having to record any type of personal identifiable information. Back to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Dino. And I know that I wanted to also ask you at the end the questions about the privacy and security and how the personal identifiable information is protected, because I know that this is, it's something that we have to be extremely careful about when talking about digital identities. Yeah, so thanks a lot for that thought. Char, will you also chip in on that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So in decentralized identity, it's necessary, as Dino said, to have a place where information about the issuers and credentials is stored. For example, you need a place to store your decentralized identifiers or DIDs, as well as being able to store schemas and credential definitions, which are similar to, it's like a template for a verifiable credential. When you are thinking about where you need to host assets that you need for a decentralized identity ecosystem, there are some important characteristics you need in storing those schemas, DIDs, etc. You need the assets to be highly available. Everyone needs to be able to know the schema at any time to be able to interact with that credential to issue or verify it. In that vein, it's ideal to have your assets hosted or distributed across multiple organizations or geographic boundaries. That makes it easy. That makes it harder to take, if there's an outage, to take that asset offline. And you need the assets to be tamper-proof. If someone can go in and change a schema or a DID, that would cause a lot of problems. So with those characteristics, it sounds quite a lot like blockchain. It's possible to not use a ledger, of course, but ledgers are really good at making things tamper-proof, distributed, highly available, which is why they're a great choice for decentralized identity ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Char. And I was, when started to look into blockchain as a technology, and, at the time, back in 17, 18, there was always search for that killer app, right? And I think that digital identities for sure are one of the important aspects. I mean, one of the very nice use cases that can be addressed with the technology, right? Okay, so and now finally we do have quite some things to cover in our presentation. So let's finally jump into the AI finally. So now that we covered the digital identity and the role of blockchain, let's then jump into the final element of our presentation today, and let's talk about how AI is integrated into this mix. And there's been quite some talk about how AI is transforming the management and the verification of the digital identities. But I know that our panelists have can bring a lot of unique perspectives to that to the table. So I would like to ask you, how is AI integrated into the management of the digital identities, and what are the benefits that such integration can offer? Dino, will you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. So in my specific case, we definitely lived the advent of AI and the fact that especially in the last 2 years, AI became a prominent technology that started to be used everywhere by everyone. So as I alluded to before, we went live in January 2021. And very soon we realized, for example, that in the specific domain of facial recognition and biometrics, AI was going to introduce, it was going to present a threat. For those who are familiar with biometric, with facial recognition, there are specific categories of attacks, one of which is called the presentation attack. And AI is definitely a relevant technology that can create quite serious issue to the onboarding of an individual through the use of biometrics and facial recognition because of the use of deepfakes. So we basically look at the challenge and we try to then embed an AI module in our solution to detect and to the extent possible to prevent during the onboarding and the enrollment of our user in the system by trying to identify if and when a potential user could probably try to use an AI engine, an AI mechanism to fake their enrollment. Not only, of course, at the point of enrollment, which, however, is being the initial point, it's being deemed extremely critical, sensitive, but also throughout the process when, on the periodic basis, our users are asked to confirm that indeed that they are still alive, and therefore to provide a proof of existence. So by embedding, by using exactly the same technology, but in this case, to prevent and detect potential misuse of the AI, we, I believe, enhance the capability, the ability and the value proposition of our solution in making sure that when and if indeed technology continues to advance, we keep pace with those technology, if possible, by using the same technology from a defense point of view, and indeed trying to remain in alignment with the evolution of this type of technology and the increase of threats and risk. Back to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting, Dino. Is you call it the presentation attack, right?
Correct.
Did you already experience it in your
Likely not, but having the module now embedded in the process, at least we'll feel, if I may use the term, relatively comfortable that we apply the due diligence. As you can appreciate, I think Charles made reference before to the concept of trust. You did, Mariana did as well. Being an international organization, having a governing body composed of representatives of 193 countries, it definitely puts a lot of onus on us to demonstrate that to the extent possible, we apply due diligence in making sure that these threats and risks are identified. And of course, as I alluded to before, I have a professional deformation. My background is in auditing. So I've been on a mission to try to find as much as possible criteria, methodology, processes to provide assurance on the system. And indeed, this is for me one of the biggest pain points, because inevitably, being an emerging technology, we do not have yet a mature corpus of criteria, of standard, of methodology that can allow us to provide assurance in a way that is generally accepted. So definitely that's something that attract a lot of our attention, my time specifically.
No, interesting. Absolutely. Yeah. To be prepared for, to prevent it before it happens, right? It's a great talk. Great. Thanks a lot, Dino. Char, can you also tell us a little bit about the final component, the AI, and how does it play into the Nexus?
Absolutely. I would say as well that biometrics is one of the main big capabilities that can be added to decentralized identity by AI, especially in the realm of storage of biometric data. So how do you securely store biometric data? What if there's a data breach? Obviously, it's bad when password data is compromised, but passwords can be changed in a way that you can't change your fingerprints or your iris. So decentralized identity offers a solution where you can use biometric data for identity verification without having to store anyone's biometric data, which it sounds like what Dino is implementing. For example, you go to the bank and have your fingerprint scanned to identify yourself. The software creates a biometric template from your fingerprints. This is a mathematical representation of your biometric traits of your fingerprints. And each time you scan your fingerprint, that biometric template is calculated and compared to a previous stored template. So the bank or whatever verifier does need that previous biometric template to compare the results of your current fingerprint scan to, but what if it doesn't have to store that biometric data? So the solution we envision is that when you first identify yourself to the bank, they scan your fingerprint, calculate the biometric template, and issue you a verifiable credential with that biometric template, which they don't store in their internal database. The next time you visit the bank, you present both your credential with that biometric data as well as having your fingerprint scanned, so they can still have that verification piece without having to store the data themselves. So as long as the privacy issues are sufficiently handled, we think that AI can add a lot of useful capabilities in digital identity. It can advise on which disclosures to make on personal information, to make or not make, or take action based on personal information in a way that is secure and privacy preserving. So there's a lot that AI and digital identity can do for each other. Each can augment the other's capabilities in a mutually beneficial way.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for pointing that out, Char. And, we are also talking about this in the task force that Mariana has mentioned in that position paper as well, right? How basically the two technologies can augment each other. So thank you for making that point as well. All right, that's great. Thanks a lot, Dino and Char. Now we have defined our concepts and successfully invested almost 40 minutes. So let us talk a little bit also about the industry applications. So as we know, and as both Dino and Char have alluded to, the digital identities that are powered by blockchain and AI, among other technologies, are not limited to one single sector, but exist across a variety of fields, which are, finance, healthcare, education, and much more. And of course, each industry has their own unique opportunities, but also the challenges that they face. So I wanted to just, before we go into the benefits and challenges, talk a little bit about if you can provide an example of how this Nexus is applied across different industries from that you are familiar with, right? And maybe we can start with Char this time, and then Dino can also tell us a little bit about the UN applications.
Absolutely. So my colleague, Trevor Butterworth, with his co-author, Carl Schwepp, have published a position paper on how decentralized identity can be used with a virtual AI assistant or co-pilot. So this is more of a conceptual example of how decentralized identity can be used to grant limited and granular permissions to an AI assistant and significantly reduce that attack surface. So in this example, I want my AI co-pilot to book a flight for me online, taking care of everything, including payment based on my learned preferences and needs for this particular trip. So this is certainly convenient, but disastrous if my AI co-pilot were to be hacked or if my identity is compromised, since my AI co-pilot can access my personal information and payment methods and has a predictive understanding of my behavior. So a lot could go wrong in terms of privacy and security, but decentralized identity can help mitigate these risks by providing continuous mutual authentication between my AI co-pilot and myself. So I need to be able to authoritatively verify that I'm interacting with my AI co-pilot and it alone. At the same time, my AI co-pilot needs to be able to authoritatively verify me and only me as its owner, as well the bank, airline, any other entity in this interaction needs to be able to authoritatively verify that this co-pilot represents me and only me. So in creating my AI co-pilot in this scenario, the software creates an identity credential for the co-pilot, which it holds. This makes the co-pilot verifiable as mine. And when the co-pilot goes to purchase the flight on my behalf, it first presents its credential to the airline so that the airline can verify that the co-pilot represents me. To take it a step further, I could also have set up pre-authorized payment with very granular permissions around price range, vendor, date range, etc. And if the co-pilot had not been able to verify that it represents me, or if it had tried to do anything outside of its set parameters, it would not have been able to perform this task. So the framework of using decentralized identity with AI makes the continuous verification required by Zero Trust easy. And overall, verifiable credentials can be used to allow highly granular permissions to an AI assistant that limit the scope of what it is allowed to do so that it is useful and convenient without being recklessly powerful.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Char. And is the paper that you mentioned, is that publicly available?
It is. I would be happy to send out a link in the chat to it.
Super. Thanks a lot, Char. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Dino, will you also share a little bit about how you are, some examples, how you are applying this at the UN as well?
Sure. So as I alluded to, we went live in 2021, and if you will, the impact, the outcome of the implementation was quite notable. And indeed, we did receive an award from the Secretary General of the UN on innovation and sustainability. We received recognition from outside parties, for example, Gartner, who wrote a case study on our implementation, as well as the Government Blockchain Association, the GBA, also gave us an award for social impact. So if you will, the impact of our implementation resonated in many areas. And within the UN itself, indeed resonated to the extent that our solution gave input to now a broader solution to create a digital identity for all the UN staff members across the globe. This is an ongoing initiative. We are about to go live with a pilot now in the next month. For now, this is limited to a subset of UN entities. There are 6 UN entities with the support of the United Nations International Computing Center, which is the entity that actually developed and supports our solution for digital identity. But the use of blockchain is definitely evolved, and it has been adopted in many other areas. Colleagues in the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, have used blockchain for an application that I believe is being piloted for transferring funds to a refugee in Ukraine. My colleagues in IFA, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, headquartered in Rome, had implemented the application called Trace to utilize a blockchain exactly for tracing the disbursement and the utilization of loans and funds that are issued to farmers. UNICEF, I believe, also has implemented an application using blockchain. So we have within the UN system several examples of how this technology can be employed indeed in support of the mandate of the UN, the various UN entities, funds, programs, the agency, but ultimately for the benefit and the greater goods of the beneficiary. So what for me is really important, of course, I'm definitely biased, as has been said at the beginning, digital identity is the cornerstone of several and probably all other use cases. In our specific cases, now that we do have a relatively high degree of confidence that we know who we are transacting, the sky is the limit. The next steps is really to identify what are those value-added services, notification, transfer, acquisition of document, whatever that may be the case that an entity, for example, an entity in the public domain like ours should provide, can be done using this technology because the digital identity component at the beginning of the process has been addressed. By knowing and by having a high level of confidence the transacting parties are known, there is that level of trust, if you will, that is being now built into the process and therefore drive additional sub-processes, additional activities, and delivery of fundamental services that are required for the implementation of our mandate. Back to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Dino. I was just wondering, out of also my personal interest, because you mentioned it's being used across different agencies within the UN. Is that also a publicly available things that we could find online?
Yes, indeed. There is actually an entity called UNIN, the United Nations Innovation Network, that create an inventory, not only about blockchain, of course, but the term innovation is about identifying all the project initiative, whether on pilot, whether a plan, whether they be implemented, vis-a-vis project that through emerging technology, agency, funds, programs of the United Nations have adopted and implemented. So UNIN maintains a publicly available, accessible inventory of this initiative. And also there are several fora within the UN system where we, and also me personally, I make regular presentation about our initiative. For example, the United Nations Internet Governance Forum, the World Summit on Information Society, and many other initiatives at the international level that are focusing exactly on showcasing the use of innovative and emerging technology within the UN system.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Dino. I'll check this out. And I guess you'll have to do then another webinar in 6 months when you start the pilot. All right, great. Now, as we mentioned it briefly earlier, let's maybe talk a little bit about challenges and solutions. We discussed, how these technologies are enabling, and it's great. And but maybe, let's talk a little bit about different technical and operational hurdles that these technologies present as well. So, Char, maybe you can start again. What are the main challenges that are associated with merging these technologies? And are there any solutions that are popping up?
Yeah, absolutely. So privacy, of course, is one of the main challenges that we're seeing in merging digital identities with AI technologies. AI makes it very difficult to trace where information is coming from. So policies around training data are really important. Like any new technology, AI is solving a bunch of problems and creating a bunch of problems at the same time. At the Hyperledger Identity Special Interest Group, that I co-chair with my colleague Tim Spring and Vipin Bharathan. We invite speakers in the community to give talks on their areas of expertise. One of our speakers has been Dmitry Zagadulin, who works with the MIT Digital Credentials Consortium, and he gave a great presentation on AI and decentralized identity. He summarized different areas where there are risks around AI and around the development of AI. In terms of economic risks, there are risks around the centralization of power and money in the hands of large corporations, the uncompensated labor of artists and other creators who have created the data that AI is trained on, and job replacement without safety nets like universal basic income. In terms of legal and cultural risks, an AI model is just not an objective, impartial entity. It reflects the biases of the data it was trained on, and more broadly, the culture in which it was created. When AIs start making decisions, who will be held accountable? So some of the big questions are, where does the training data come from? Who gets credit for the results? What are solutions to biases in the data? Of course, a lot of these risks are in the realm of law and ethics, but there are ways that technical solutions can perhaps support some of those decisions and make them a little easier and provide paths forward. So we can mitigate some of these risks with the ability to authoritatively verify information and identity online. Am I talking to a human? If so, which human? Am I talking to an AI? If so, with what training data was this AI trained on? What algorithms is it using? So both humans and things like AI agents, pieces of training data, algorithms, models, et cetera, need to have verifiable digital identities. AI is only possible because of the enormous amount of data readily available at this point in history, and decentralized identity can help to secure and trace that data. AI also makes it very easy for someone with harmful intentions to impersonate masses of real humans online. Decentralized identity makes it easy to prove that you're a real human online and to verify who you're actually talking to on the other end. So AI is very powerful and can be unpredictable, but decentralized identity can help place boundaries around the capabilities of AIs taking action.
Yeah, that's great point, Char. I mean, especially, there's been so much, people will just call it scary when they see all of the deepfakes that are possible, right? And especially this year within all the elections that are coming up across the world, right? And this was one of the biggest concerns, right? So it's good to hear also that there is a way that decentralized identity can help there, right? Great. Dino, would you also like to talk a little bit about the challenges and any potential solutions?
Sure. So, and from my point of view, definitely, I'm going to use my direct experience, if you will. So my experience may not resonate with everybody, but this is very specific about the domain of our operation. So one of the problems that we face, that it was brought to our attention when we went live with our solution, is that the assumption that everybody has a mobile device, a digital device, was not completely accurate, because indeed in certain parts of the world, we determined that indeed data availability and data assumption was not correct. And therefore, although we still need to make sure that whatever type of service we are providing, it is universally accessible. It is for the benefit of all our user and client. And therefore, we face the concept and the issue of, if you will, the digital divide, the fact that in certain part of our operation in the field, not everybody had possess a device that could have allowed them to benefit from the solution. Hence, the solution, hence the brainstorming that came with that, and we are about now to install kiosks. So the idea was to enable this individual to visit a UN office in the field. Likely we have several offices decentralized across the entire globe. And by using, for example, an iPad installed as a kiosk, they could still benefit from the application, from the solution, conduct the entire life cycle of the process, be able to enroll and be able to confirm on the periodic basis that indeed that they are still alive and therefore comply with the requirement that they will ensure them to keep receiving their pension benefit. So this was, I believe, a very significant example of sometimes thinking that the technology can and shall be used by everybody, but that's unfortunately not always necessarily the case. Hence, the need to come up with alternative option. I believe that with the kiosk option, hopefully we will be able to address this issue. The second one I already alluded to, and again, this is a particular obsession that I have because of my professional background, as I alluded to before, is the fact that it's hard to provide assurance on solutions that make use of blockchain technology, or for that matter, of any other emerging technology, being AI, being machine learning, whatever that may be the case. And the fact is because indeed they are emerging, they are innovative, and therefore there is relatively limited history and work on this technology. So when it comes, there is definitely a lot of effort, good result in using this application, using this technology, but there is less in terms of providing assurance. So when I was trying to find criteria to demonstrate that in front of our governing body and oversight body that indeed the solution is trustworthy, I had several challenges, and ultimately I had to use what's available. So, for example, the implementation, the solution that I implemented here, the UN Pension Fund, has been certified in accordance with the ISO 27001 of the ISO standard for information security management system. Now, for those who are familiar with this standard, with this the cybersecurity domain, they will definitely know that the ISO 27001 is not a standard specifically focused on the use of blockchain or any other technology specifically, but it's about a process, about how security is managed. So for the lack of better criteria and independently verifiable system, I use the ISO 27001. At the same time, I had to, for example, request the conduct of independent audit for data privacy. I had to request the conduct of audit for the algorithm that we use in the biometric recognition. So ultimately, I have a fragmented series of assurance documents that put together, hopefully, will provide a proof that indeed the solution has been tested, has been validated independently. But again, we are lacking a set of generally accepted principle vis-a-vis blockchain, vis-a-vis, I believe, also biometric and associated technology. Hence, my initiative that I'm now co-leading within the UN Internet Governance Forum, we created a working group called the Dynamic Coalition on Blockchain Assurance Standardization to try to build that consensus vis-a-vis criteria, standard, and methodology to provide assurance on the use of blockchain. Thank you. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Dino. And would you also be able to share this link on the Dynamic Coalition for people that want to check it out and join maybe? Great, thank you.
I'll put on the chat.
Great, thanks. And also thank you for pointing out the topic of digital divide. Don in the comments also said, thanks for pointing that out, because we are often talking about things, how can they improve it, but it's true that it's simply not the same for everybody across the world, right? So that's, I think, a very important point, especially coming from the UN as well, right? So yeah, thanks for bringing that point up as well. All right, maybe we can delve just a little bit to touch and to conclude these topics about the privacy and security. And we've been talking about it quite actually a lot, right? Both of you have alluded to it. But it's such an important topic that I just wanted to highlight it again. And I basically want to ask you, how can blockchain and AI technologies ensure this privacy and security? Char already mentioned, actually both of you had mentioned that none of the data or the personal identifiable information is stored, on the blockchain itself. Also, I think both of you have also alluded to a little bit of the biometric solutions and how are these done. So just to wrap this up, would you mind giving us a little bit of final thoughts about how these technologies can ensure the privacy and security of PII? Dino, will you go first?
Oh, thank you. Sure. So indeed, as I alluded to before, I think there are definitely a lot of opportunities for AI blockchain to complement each other. And again, as you alluded to, the example of using AI during the enrollment and the onboarding process to confirm the biometric validity or trustworthiness of the process, I think is, from my point of view, in my case, a perfect example. And the point being here is really about recognizing that the AI are probabilistic technologies and blockchain are deterministic technology. So if we are able to benefit by combining the benefit that each one of these technology offer, I think we will make progress in creating, again, that level of assurance, that level of trustworthiness that it should be expected when a solution makes use of this technology. Also, I think that furthermore, there are different other use cases where, for example, data and the functioning itself of the blockchain can be subject to an analysis conducted by an AI solution to detect, for example, anomalies, to identify patterns, to predict threats in the blockchain network itself. So again, definitely blockchain technology for trustless transaction. However, they still live and rely on an ecosystem that, for example, is based on the internet protocol. And therefore, everything that applies to the internet protocol, all the threats, all the risk, inevitably, directly or indirectly, may have an impact, may affect the utilization of the blockchain. And therefore, an AI that can be utilized for vulnerability scanning, for anomaly detection, for threat detection, I think it will definitely add value. And therefore, I think that as we move along, hopefully we will be able to see vendors and the solution that can complement this new technology and identify specific use cases, because I think really there are an infinite number of use cases and not only one specific use case. So there are definitely scenarios, I think, that can be identified where the two technologies together can add value to the entire process. Thank you. Back to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dina. And Char, would you also like to add some final thoughts on security and privacy aspects?
Absolutely. And in terms of AI, it supports the privacy and security through biometric authentication in a privacy-preserving manner, as we discussed earlier, and by ensuring that the policies and designs are in place to prevent it from using private information improperly. In terms of blockchain, it helps to ensure privacy and security by providing that highly available, distributed, tamper-evident solution for storing the cryptographic information necessary for verifiable credentials. Blockchain also allows the model of decentralized identity to offer really cool privacy features like zero-knowledge proofs. This is where you can reveal only the minimum amount of information needed for verification, like a true-false, rather than actually revealing the specific data about you, as well as selective disclosure is another great privacy feature, which allows you to select the pieces of information from an identity credential to reveal in a given interaction. And additionally, in terms of privacy features in using blockchain, it means that the issuer of a credential doesn't know when the holder of a credential presents it for verification, which is a privacy issue if the issuer can track that. And again, the blockchain stores the information needed for verification, no private, personally identifying information, so that the issuer and verifier interact only indirectly through the ledger, which creates that trust anchor that Dino mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Dino and Char. So, very important topics, and I'm glad to hear that both of you are mentioning it. Now, we are at 1 hour mark, so let's talk a little bit about the regulation as well. And that's, as Mariana has also mentioned at the beginning, the papers or the content that the task force is working on is also, presented to the European Commission, and the, regulatory landscape around blockchain AI is ever evolving, and as we all of these new technologies, they're evolving so fast that the regulation sometimes have problem of keeping up, right? So that's why I wanted to ask you, Dino and Char, what do you think? So how is regulatory landscape shaping up right now around the use of blockchain and AI, particularly in digital identity management, of course? Dino, would you mind going first?
Yes, sure. So as I mentioned before, one of the leading instruments within the UN is definitely the set of Sustainable Development Goals that specifically speak about identity and the right to be identified. So that in terms of principle. I think that the one also of the very important, most recent issuance is here at the UN during the month of March. There was a resolution of the General Assembly that was sponsored by the United States, and it had the support of pretty much all countries, that is about the AI, the UN resolution on AI, based on 7 principles. And these principles are basically focused on promoting human rights, ensuring sustainable development, on regulation and governance, international cooperation, as we alluded to the example, closing the digital divide, ensure inclusive and equitable access, and of course, the responsible use of AI. I think there is a recognition within the international community of the need to collaborate and the need to have certain principles that in turn shall, if you will, guide the national legislation in order to make sure that vis-a-vis, of course, the specificities of certain field, certain sectors, certain industry, where this technology may be utilized and where digital identity may be recognized, there are certain fundamental principles that I think brings the international community together. And I think, again, if we can summarize this approach, I think what I personally felt is by reading this principle, there is indeed the focus on ensuring human centricity on how, when, and when these technology are going to be utilized. Thank you. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Dino. Yeah, very interesting point. And I guess the people can also Google the SDGs themselves. I know that it's such an important topic, right? We also, with the Linux Foundation, we often see how our goals and the project are connected to the SDGs. Dino, I'm sorry, did you want to add something just so that you come on mute, off mute?
I just want to say that I'm going to put in the chat the link to the UN, the recent UN resolution on AI.
Great. Thank you so much, Dino. Great. Okay, Char, would you also like to talk a little bit about the regulation?
Absolutely. So looking to the future and what we hope to see, we really want to see regulations that motivate the correct use of blockchain ledgers. What's important is that you only have the right things on the ledger, which then support your off-ledger interactions. And it's important that the legislation is sensitive around what goes on the ledger and what should not be on the ledger. Around AI specifically, we want to see regulations related to the privacy of training data. It should be really clear, will my interactions, questions, any information that I provide to a generative model be included in the training data for that model? Or if I'm providing it with proprietary or private information, will that show up in its responses? So those are some important distinctions we really want to see legislation around.
Interesting. Very interesting, Char. Yeah. All right. Thank you both for also talking about the regulations. And and then I also wanted to ask you about the ethical considerations, because we know that, the regulations, laws are there on one end, but what are the ethical considerations when it comes to this nexus of blockchain and AI? Char has already talked about the biases coming out of the data that AI is trained on, right? So, and there is a lot of literature out there as well expressing these concerns about the biases that are inherent to the data. Right, so how is the AI processing this? And of course, there's also potential for a misuse, what Dino was mentioning earlier as well. So I want to ask you, what are in your view, major ethical considerations that leveraging blockchain and AI for digital identity management are, and how can they be addressed? And how can we be proactive in addressing those? Dino, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. Indeed, I think that the concept of ethical principle have really been identified and alluded to. So trying to, if you will, become a little bit more granular here. So I think first and foremost, there is an issue of transparency. So how are these technology utilized? What is the input that goes into the processes and the solution that are based on this technology? What is the, if you will, the process itself, how this input is going to be utilized in order to provide, again, that sense of reliance that the hallucination is not going to take place. And also recognition of the ownership of the data that goes into the process, in order to make sure that in addition to be transparent, that we also acknowledge and recognize the owners of the data that in the first place it was utilized. There are, of course, additional consideration, especially as we all know when it comes to the domain of blockchain. Famously, the proof of work mechanism for mining is always being subject to heavy criticism because of the consumption of a high level of energy for the process itself to work. And therefore, again, sustainability of the technology, I think it's probably in the second place, immediately after the ethical consideration of the data ownership and the transparency of the process. Also, I think that as a logical sequence to this principle, we also need to have a mechanism for accountability. Who is accountable for the end result, for the outcome, for the utilization of this technology? And once we have identified and determined accountability, I believe also we need to determine what are the responsibilities for data privacy, for data confidentiality, for data security. So if you will, I think this is a logical sequence of concepts and principle that needs to be translated into mechanism that can be clearly identified. whether it's from the point of view of a user, whether it's from a point of view of an official entity or authority that perform its due diligence, its monitoring, and the associated activities. Also, I think that it's important to ensure that the utilization of this technology is part of a broader agreement with the relevant stakeholders. Because again, this type of solution, once they are deployed in the public domain, are utilized by many categories of individuals, by many users. And therefore, I think engaging and fostering multi-stakeholder collaboration is key to make sure that we try to identify and prevent, to the extent possible, the unintended consequences that may derive by using, with the right intent, the right technology, but not considering the potential impact that could have on certain category, especially the categories of individual or groups that are weaker, so to speak, from the point of view of knowledge, from the point of view of awareness, from the point of view of training. And ultimately, I think that, again, I'm definitely biased, working for the United Nations, adhering to the universal principle value, and again, the Sustainable Development Goals. I think it will definitely help to ensure that there is an adequate level of collaboration and understanding on the use of this technology. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dino. I was just, I'm glad that you brought this up, because there was actually in the last weeks, there was a lot of talk about within the community about the decentralized AI, because one of the fears that seem to be very prevalent is that the big companies that are already very powerful would just become more powerful because they have an access to the best training data. It's expensive to train the AI models, and that was, the Emad Mostaq, the CEO of Stability AI, also stepped down, and he said you cannot solve the problem of centralized AI with more centralized AI, right? So I really like the point that you brought up regarding the involvement of different stakeholders, and to represent the needs of different various groups, not maybe just some very high-powered executives and politicians, maybe, right? So that's a very, very good point. Great. Char, would you also like to talk a little bit about the ethical considerations?
Absolutely. And to go a bit more deeply into the biases, and just to keep emphasizing that topic, AI is as biased as the data that it is trained on, and perpetuates and reflects the biases on which it is trained. So there are very serious ethical considerations around biometric identification differing in accuracy based on race and gender. Again, I believe that problem is bigger than any technical solution, but technical solutions can help provide better paths forward. A lot of AI training data is information from the internet. Verifiable credentials derive trust of the data independent of where you receive it. If an AI model is trained on information stored in verifiable credentials, we can more easily trace and evaluate the training data, which can help us understand and mitigate biases introduced by the data, since we can more easily know where each piece of training data is coming from, and that it has not been tampered with. As has also been discussed, AI is at risk of contributing to the centralization of power and increasing wealth inequality. We need solutions to the problem that the work of many writers, artists, designers, etc., their work is being used to train the AI models that will replace their jobs without consent or compensation for those creators. And again, that's a huge problem. Decentralized identity allows creators to digitally sign their work and make it evident and cryptographically verifiable if an image, video, etc., is AI generated or original work. And so it's a technical solution that can help support those paths forward.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thanks for mentioning that, Char, about the IP protection and how the ironically, AI can be trained on the artist data, which it can then in turn replace, right? It's a serious concern. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, great. We have 10 minutes left, so I think it would be nice to maybe have a little bit of a time to ask questions for the audience. So maybe if we can just quickly touch upon on what do you see into the future, right? So, and I know that obviously making predictions is hard, but there's a lot of potential for AI and blockchain to transform our society. So, just wanted to ask you, what are, in your view, of course, some of the key trends that you see in the next 5 years in terms of this convergence? Dino, would you like to start with that one?
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, so maybe I'm definitely again biased vis-a-vis my hopes. I definitely hope that if you will, the conversation, the approach around AI matures in terms of what are the criteria to provide assurance, but also what are the criteria to determine when and if a blockchain, for example, is the right technology to be used. I'm very sensitive, and I definitely understand, for example, certain comments made by experts. One in particular, Bruce Schneier, a famous world-renowned cryptographer. He's very precise in distinguishing blockchain that, from his point of view, it's a term that can or should be used only for public blockchain with certain characteristics, versus instead the use of blockchain data structure for enterprise use. So I hope that the understanding, I hope that the criteria of supporting a decision to when and how to use blockchain would mature and will be better, if you will, made available to the relevant parties. The second thing is that I think that we are probably going to see more better standardization that in turn will hopefully help interoperability, because I think one of the limitations is right now decentralized identifier, the DID protocol are a solution that are fine limits. And in fact, I think I saw a question in the chat said, what about interoperability with public blockchain? What about the use cross-border of this solution? So the standardization, the interoperability of protocols, I think needs to be improved in order to get wider acceptance and enable its use on larger scale. And ultimately, again, just to repeat, the common denominator of all this conversation, at least from my point of view, is to ensure that the human being remains at the center. As Char alluded to, there are problems that are bigger than technology. Technology can help, but ultimately we are the actor. We are in charge. We should make sure that our principle, our value will guide us in a human-centric use of these beautiful technologies. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dina. And thank you for also bringing out standardization, interoperability. I saw that question as well. And I think it's a very interesting topic. We could have a whole nother webinar about that one, right? So yeah, thanks for that. But I think right now we're pushing our limit. So maybe Char, if you can also tell us a little bit about our take on the future, and then let's see if we can take in some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. One trend looking to the future that I want to call out is that many current methods of authenticating people online will be so easily faked using AI that they will be or already are unusable. For example, of course, AI image recognition capability affects the usefulness of something like reCAPTCHA. Voice and video deepfakes are advancing so quickly that methods for detection are struggling to keep up. This has massive implications around media and news, since it will be very easy to create fake evidence. So a solution that we see looking forward is to certify videos and other media using technologies like verifiable credentials instead of or in addition to using AI to detect what is real versus AI generated. Eric Schouten, who works at Adobe with the Content Authenticity Initiative, he was a speaker at the Hyperledger Identity Special Interest Group. He discussed how AI generated deepfakes can create a cat and mouse game for AI detection of deepfakes, and that the future forward method to solve this problem is attribution more than detection, meaning that there needs to be a way to attribute a piece of content to a specific creator or to an AI model if it is AI generated. And the Content Authenticity Initiative that he works with is about allowing content creators to make tamper evident digitally signed assertions about what they've created. And then this in turn allows content consumers to understand where the content they're viewing is coming from. So we expect AI image and video creation to only get better and better. And we see a future forward vision where blockchain and AI help support this solution to allow any piece of content to have its source and history easily verifiable.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Char. And I see that one of the participants also said it's concerning how deepfakes are becoming normal, right? And I agree, it's an alarming trend at 100%. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. Bara, I don't know, is there an option to unmute a person if they raise their hands? Because I went through the comments and I think that Dino and Char covered most of the questions. And apologies if some were not answered. Maybe you can just quickly type it out here.
Or they can unmute themselves directly. It's possible.
Okay, can you? Okay, so would anybody like to unmute themselves? Are there any comments or questions? Or maybe something that I missed. Apologies. I think that Dino and Char have answered the comments that we had in the chat. All right. Well, if no one is, if you come up with something, we still have 3 minutes, so you can also put it in the chat. Otherwise, I just wanted to ask Dino and Char for any final thoughts, as well as how they can reach you if you are available to, to get more information from. So go ahead. Are there any final thoughts on that?
Char, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this discussion has been really interesting. I've learned a lot and I'm excited to keep learning. In terms of final thoughts, I mainly have suggestions on resources. If you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend reading the paper that I mentioned on using decentralized identity with an AI copilot, which I can send out all these links as well in the chat. If you're not familiar with decentralized identity, I recommend looking into Indicio's Beginner's Guide to Decentralized Identity. That's a great place to start. I also want to put in a plug and encourage everyone to attend the Hyperledger Identity Special Interest Group. You can go to our webpage and look at our recordings, join our meetings. I particularly recommend checking out the presentation on AI and decentralized identity from Dmitry Zagadulin of MIT, as well as the presentation on the Content Authenticity Initiative from Eric Schouten of Adobe. And as well, reach out if you'd like to be a speaker, if you have a topic or demo that's relevant to decentralized identity. We would love to have you join us. And of course, to continue the conversation, I would love to connect on LinkedIn or email. I can send those out in the chat. If you have observations or suggestions, I would love to hear them. Thank you again, Tomas and Dino and Mariana so much. This was a great opportunity and I learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Char.
So from my side, again, I definitely subscribe to everything that Char said. Thank you so much for the organizer. Thank you so much for Thomas, the support that Bara, Mariana provided to us. Same thing for those who would like to get in touch with me, please reach me through LinkedIn by using my name. I know that it's not an easy name and it's long, but as you can see from the details of this webinar, you can easily identify my name on LinkedIn. And just share. From my point of view, I've been invited to share and present my experience, but definitely I can tell you that what I found to be invaluable is actually the sharing and collaboration, listening to other people's perspective, sometimes also questioning, criticism. They help me be better prepared for those occasions when in front of very formal official event, I was challenged and questioned vis-a-vis, why are you using it as a blockchain? Is a blockchain really secure and safe, and so forth and so on? So I found very invaluable the socialization and the interaction with like-minded people and subject matter experts. There are many out there. So from my point of view, I always look forward to learn from the question that I'm asked. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Looking forward to continue my collaboration with the Hyperledger and Inatva.
Great. Thank you so much, Dino and Char. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. And I have to say, I learned a lot. And even if we spoke before, I always learn something new from you too. So it's been a true pleasure. And thank you very much, Mariana and Bara, for organizing. Yeah, also feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to continue conversation if you'd like. Now we're at the time, so thank you primarily all of our guests for joining, for your great questions, and looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.